Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mark Bruce with Fit Strength Performance, and today I'm going to talk about the 4 assessments that we use when we evaluate our athletes. The first one is going to be the supine active straight leg raise. The second one is going to be the supine active hip flexor stretch. The third one is going to be a traditional bodyweight squat. And then the fourth one is going to be a supine overhead assessment. It's important that when an athlete comes into our gym, we give them that one-on-one attention because it's going to help us do a number of things. Number one, it's going to help us learn about the athlete, understand their injury history, because I think that's very valuable in kind of figuring out where an athlete needs to go. Number two, it's going to help us learn about their goals. And we always like the athlete to tell us what their goals are. And then next, we get to really build a rapport. We get to have a conversation. We get to have we get to learn. They get to learn about us. They get to hear about our story. We get to ask questions. They get to ask questions. And if they're thrown into a workout without that time to really sit down and have that conversation, it's really difficult to develop that plan for that person. Then once we get through that stage, we go into our movement evaluation. So within that movement evaluation, we really want to see where their limitations are. And so with that, we begin with that active straight leg raise. Now, that active straight leg raise is going to tell us a number of things. It's going to tell us, can the athlete not only if they have proper hip external rotation, but also if they have proper hip internal rotation, which is very limited. So if you've seen in the video with the supine ASLR, the active straight leg raise, if you can't get your leg to go at a certain height. So if you look at that line, if that line is at the knee and you can't get your heel past that line, well, you failed that assessment, meaning that you can't internally rotate, meaning that when your body is supposed to step, supposed to sprint, supposed to jump, supposed to do anything athletically or just naturally, your body is not going into internal rotation. Because when you look at a squat, a lunge, when you look at early stage propulsion, late stage propulsion, your body's going to go into that internal rotation, external rotation, and then internal rotation, which eventually leads to that foot pronation, which is important to produce force and be an athlete. So that's telling us right there that number one, you're going to be limited in hip IR. You're going to have something going on with your hamstrings, whether it's hip related or you have really, really tight hamstrings, which means, performing RDLs, deadlifts is going to be difficult. So we need to add in some fillers in order to help you get to that point of hip flexion or extension. So that's why it's very valuable. It could show us that, it could be a reason why you're having knee pain or low back pain, a situation like that. So there's going to be something off with the hip or foot when we identify that ASLR. The next is going to be that active hip that supine active hip flexor stretch, because we're going to notice that with that movement, can you properly externally rotate at the hip? Because a lot of people can pull that knee to the chest without noticing any issues, but you will get the occasion where the knee bows out to the right or left, which means that you're compensating, which means that you're not properly externally rotating at the hip. So that's going to give us a good idea as to how you squat. It's going to give us an idea whether we need to work on some proper hip external rotation. Do we need to wake up the TFL, the piriformis, certain muscles like that? Then that next movement, that body weight squat, is very important because squatting is a basic pattern. So when we look at that squat, we're looking at a handful of things. I know a lot of people don't want to have your knees go over your toes, but that's very important to have occur. So when we see that body weight squat, if you look at that video, I struggle with this movement because I'm really restricted at the ankles. So a lot of times we'll see an athlete do one of three things, right? We'll see the knees cave in, we'll see the foot collapse, or we're going to see, a hip shift. Those are typically what's going to happen. And, the question is that valgus occurring at the knee or at the foot? A lot of times it's at that foot. So we're going to see that valgus, meaning the knees going in, because of a foot issue, whether it's overpronating, not properly pronating, and then we may see a restriction in the ankle where you see that chest completely fall down, which means when you're squatting, catching, cleaning, when you're going to jump, you might really get stuck at the ankle and you might have some shearing forces going down at the knee, meaning the tibia, the femur off. So there's a lot of issues that occur when your knees get stuck to a certain point. And we like to see that ankle dorsal flexion test where we get that foot or that knee going over that toe at about 3 to 5 inches. If you're really, really flexible and have great mobility, you'll get 5. But if we're seeing someone in that 3 to 5 inch range, they're going to move okay. We will need to build on some ankle mobility, but they're not at a limitation because I'm someone that's at like 1. And that's a lot of limitation, hence why I experience knee pain. So that's that third movement. That last movement that we like to do is going to be that supine overhead reach. So this is really going to show true shoulder flexion. It's something that's been changed from having the palm in or palm flat or the palm flat as you go back to having the palms and elbows facing out. Something that I've learned speaking to some high-level physical therapists, some guys that are at the gym. That's going to show true shoulder flexion, and it's going to let us know what upper body exercises do we need to prescribe. Are you over compressed and need to learn how to expand? Are you lacking in T-spine mobility? Is there something going on with the bicep tendon? And that means that we're not going to load you with something overhead. We're not going to overdo you with bench pressing and things like that, because if you lack overhead mobility and you start throwing in benching and overhead presses or cleans and catches and jerks, well, you're going to have a bicep tendon issue, an elbow issue, a wrist issue, a shoulder issue. Could be a lat issue, something like that. And then it can go down the chain where you have hips, knees, and ankle problems. So this is why we want to get that big picture assessment to figure out where we're going to start day one so we can gradually see the progression and the improvement not only in your movement but your performance. So just to recap, we highlighted 4 assessments, but I added in a 5th. So we have our active straight leg raise, our active supine hip flexor stretch, then we have our body weight squat and our supine overhead mobility test. And then that 5th one is that ankle mobility to really see, where you're going with that, with your ankle mobility, which is really going to help you sprint, land, and be an explosive athlete. So I hope that rundown helped. Try those out at home to really see where you're at. Because if you're scoring at a 1 or lower, if you're failing, and I even put in the videos, what a fail would look like, you're at risk of an injury, but you're also missing out on those important pieces to really help you be a successful athlete. So thanks for tuning in. Like, comment, share. It really helps us spread the good word and help other athletes be successful.